This video is about a cake I made for a special occasion in our family recently. My son has just graduated from high school and is going on to college. And so for these kind of special occasions, I like to make a cake. Normally we don't eat a lot of sugar, or we try not to eat a lot of sugar, but I always like to enjoy a nice dessert when there's something special going on. The recipe that I got is from Yolanda Gamp at the YouTube channel for How to Cake It, and she also has a website, howtocakeit.com. For the ingredients, here's just a photo of what I had. Mostly bought at Trader Joe's or Costco. The date sugar was from a local food co-op that I have, and I'll talk about the date sugar in a little bit. Normally I make a chocolate or a vanilla cake, but I really like chocolate and my son likes chocolate, so I wanted to try it out. I think in the future we might just stick with vanilla because this was a little too much chocolate. Before you start putting the cake together, you do need to prepare the pans. In this case, instead of greasing the pans, I just cut out some parchment paper circles. So I traced the pan, and then I put the paper into a little circle there and folded it, and then cut inside the line. I probably cut too much inside the line, like it didn't totally cover the bottom of the pan, but it definitely made it very easy to pull stuff out. So for this recipe, because I used date sugar, it actually caused the amount of flour to change. Date sugar is quite dense, and it's made from whole dates. It has more fiber, it absorbs liquid, and so you need to decrease the flour in your recipe by 25%. So for each cup of flour I used only 3/4 of a cup of flour. So this recipe calls for 2 3/4 cups flour. I ended up using about 2 1/8 cups flour. For the baking soda, as you saw, I was trying to make sure all the lumps of the baking soda were worked out, so I kind of used my thumb and the spoon to squeeze all the lumps out. And then it was 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and a teaspoon of salt that went into the dry part. So mix the dry part together, whisking together, and then set it aside. Then you're going to want to put the cocoa powder into a heat-proof bowl and bring the water to a boil. So this was 1 cup of the cocoa powder, and then let's see here, it says bring 3 cups of water to a boil and then carefully measure exactly 2 cups and pour over the cocoa powder. So that's what I did. That was 2 cups of hot water, and I whisked it until completely smooth, and then you do want to have it cool slightly before you use it, so set that aside as well. And so here I'm measuring out my date sugar. Again, because I used date sugar, I needed to use less flour. This is the very first time I worked with date sugar. I did a quick search in the store to see if it would be any healthier. I'm always looking for healthy options, but I think it probably sugar is sugar. So this was super expensive. It was $8 for the bag, and so probably I won't use it again. It isn't really healthier. It's just different. And it was very lumpy. So the cake required this whole bag because you do need 2.5 cups of sugar. And so, so this cake started at $8 plus more for the cost of making it. So I was trying to work out some of the lumps with my hand there. Then you do need a cup of unsalted butter. Of course, I'm using the salted because I forgot to buy unsalted. And I did leave it out for a while to soften. And mixing the date sugar in with the butter was kind of interesting, as you'll see. It doesn't behave in quite the same way as regular sugar does. So at first it was mixing nicely, and then it got super greasy. It was kind of interesting. Yeah, here's how greasy it was. But I figured I would just go for it. So then you add the eggs two at a time. So 4 eggs for this recipe, and add them two at a time, beating until each addition is incorporated, and then scrape down the sides of the bowl with a spatula as needed. So yeah, the usually in between each like 2 eggs, scrape down, then 2 eggs and scrape down. The date sugar definitely affected what it looked like, but it was starting to come together here. So then you want to add the flour mixture in 4 parts, alternating with the warm cocoa mixture in 3 parts, and beating just until each addition is incorporated before adding the next. Do not overmix. I'm reading from Yolanda's recipe here. And so this was interesting, adding it in the flour. At first I had it on a nice low speed. Later I had it on a little higher speed, and so then when I added the flour it was just throwing itself back out. But this is usually how you mix a cake, is alternating the dry with something wet into your sugar and butter and eggs. So you're beating air into the cake to make it fluffier, I think is what's happening. But anyway, I'm not the expert. Other bakers can tell you why you need to do it this way. I just follow the recipe. And here I had it a little too high, and whoosh, the, the flour just came back out. The date sugar was interesting. I'll say it definitely was not as sweet. So I don't know. Like, I liked it. I liked the cake. I made a chocolate ganache as the frosting, which was super chocolatey. And so I did get feedback from the family that it was maybe a little too much chocolate. So I liked it, but I think not everyone else did as much. It was very yummy though. So at the end, I like to clean off the paddle so I'm not wasting any. And then I have 2 8-inch round cake tins here, and I'm just dividing the batter evenly between them. So you could also have done this recipe in a 9x13 pan, and then you wouldn't need to like cut it in half or decorate it or anything. I know one channel that I watch, she makes her cakes more on cookie sheets, actually, spreads them out, then she doesn't have to cut them in half either, and she can make interesting shapes cutting the cake out. But so here it is cooling. The cakes cooked. I baked them in a 350-degree oven, and it was about 55 minutes for these 8-inch pans. And I let them cool completely. And I did follow the directions which say to cover tightly with plastic wrap and refrigerate overnight. So I did do that. Here I'm trying to use that lid to underneath my knife to get an even cut all the way around, but I was not able to make that work. Then I've started using jam in the layers of my cake, then buttercream, or in this case ganache, on top of the jam. It really adds a nice flavor to the cake. So I'm using cherry jam here, kind of thinking of Black Forest cake kind of vibes. But I warmed the jam up a little to make it runnier. But Like technically, I think I should have used simple syrup, which would soak into the cake. I didn't do that because I'm not really that professional. I'm very, very amateurish about this. And so that cherry jam made it super hard to put the ganache on top. Oh my goodness. So the other problem was I made the ganache the night before and I felt this was what the directions said, and I let it sit in the fridge, and then I did pull it out a little ahead of time, but it was not spreadable at all. And then that slippery jam on top of the cake, there was no way. So here I am, just really struggling, scraping the ganache. Oh, this was interesting. So I'm skipping a lot of the torturous footage. In the background there, you can see a container with some water. That was very hot water, and I let the ganache sit in the hot water for a while. I had to walk away. I was so stubborn. I just wanted to do it when the ganache was still super hard, but my husband convinced me to walk away, let it sit in the warm water, and soften up. And then, so once I let it soften, I still should have let it soften some more, but in the end, I managed to get it decorated. It was not pretty. It was not pretty at all. But I always say as long as it tastes good, it doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm obviously not a professional baker. So here you can really see how difficult the cherry jam made it to spread. I probably shouldn't have put cherry jam on the very top level. I probably should have just put the jam on the bottom layer and the middle layer. But in the end, I got there and was able to put it all together here. And we had a nice little celebration. And I thought it was very delicious. The ganache is pretty easy, actually. It's just 2 ingredients. It is 1 pound of good quality dark chocolate and 2 cups of heavy whipping cream. You chop the chocolate as finely as possible and then put it in a bowl and pour warm cream or hot cream over it. You bring the cream to a simmer. You don't let it boil, but when you just see bubbles around the edges and movement under the surface, then you pull it off the heat and pour the chocolate over top of the pour the cream over top of the chocolate, and then just whisk it all together. And then I probably should have made it the same day that I wanted to decorate and just put it on there. So this was what it looked like when it was sliced. And it was very yummy. We love Yolanda's vanilla cake. I do like the chocolate cake. I think next time I will not use the date sugar. We'll just be simple and probably just use some good quality organic cane sugar and enjoy it because it's just a treat. The verses for this video are 1 Peter 2, verses 2 and 3. As newborn babes, long for the guileless milk of the word, in order that by it you may grow unto salvation, if you have tasted that the Lord is good.